I call this meeting of the Governance Committee to order. I'll start with a roll call. Councilor Tabor.
Here.
Councilor Lombardi.
Here.
And I'm Councilor Cook, and I am here. And Assistant Mayor Kelly is away today. So we will start with a review of the minutes from the October 15th, 2024 meeting. Did everyone have a chance to review the minutes?
Yes.
Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. The minutes from the October 15th, 2024 meeting have been approved. We're going to start our discussion today with volunteer training, which we've been working on for quite some time. But we have finally a full manual to look at and policy to look at today. And some things have been updated there as well. So with that said, I think I'm going to turn it over to Attorney Farini, who has been working very diligently on this. And thank you for all the work that you've put into this.
Oh, my pleasure. As we see,
Share it here.
yeah, as it will appear very briefly in front of the screen, our agenda calls it simply a volunteer training manual, but as you can see from the actual title, this is a board, commission, and committee handbook for non-elected volunteers. So I guess the first question is, do you want to simply call it a volunteer training manual to simplify it, or are you pleased with the title that it currently has?
I think it's good to name them all
Keep as is?
because it's, it's different than somebody who volunteers in the rec program to,
True.
coach kids.
All right, well, that was one question I had, and the other is the non-elected. So that was the other, this is drafted broadly. Certainly elected officials could review it as well, but that was another question.
Does anyone else have thoughts? I have some thoughts on that. I think it should just be for volunteers. I think that elected officials should review it, because if we're the ones voting to appoint people to committees, we should know what their responsibilities are. And some of these things do apply also to us. So I think that that's really critical, and I don't, while we have a very good training for elected officials, it's always good to have that second look. That's my thought.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
So keep the title as it is, but this would be part of what the council gets as a packet to review after elections, or?
I heard
Or just
strike,
policy?
just strike the
word
non-elected.
non-elected.
All right, strike.
Just say for volunteers. I mean, and technically, the elected officials are not volunteers. We are paid a nominal sum, so
Told
there's.
me.
Right.
I know. But still.
Okay, some of what, some of those, it is written very broadly. It could be maybe through a training, if one were made, obviously you have other things more specific to the elected council, but this is a broad brush stroke for all volunteers. So we'll strike that, and we'll do a search to make sure that we've captured that. Okay. So going very quickly through the document, there were some just basic editing, saying boards as opposed to boards, commissions, and committee throughout, which will cut, I think, a whole page out of the document, which will tidy it up nicely. We just added on page 3, under the Roberts Rules of Order, we just noted, similar to the City Council rules, of 3 minutes for public comment. Just these little nuanced edits that, we inherited the document from another city, so we just tweaked a few things. Under business relationships, because that will come out in the training, we just deleted sort of extraneous sentences that elaborated. We did the same thing under oath of office. Some have oaths and some don't. So we just tweaked that for nuance. The overarching comment, I think that was recognized, once we looked at the documents all together, and Suzanne and Susan and I spoke about this, is the whole nature of the required, training and the timing of that required training before one could serve, and the logistics of that, and basically the tone overall. When you look at all of this together, it's quite a bit. And, so I know that there have been some conversations on that. For instance, on page 5, under training, new board members will be required to participate in meeting orientation, okay? Failure to complete the training will result in their inability to participate in a meeting. So just confirming that that's the will of the committee. If it's not the will of committee, that language could be softened or extended within the first 6 months or something like that. But in looking at it all together, that was something that we did want to ask.
I would agree with that. I think this is very heavy to have somebody go through before they can actually be part of a committee. I think it's very heavy in general. That's my opinion. I think that, we ask people to volunteer, and yes, there are parameters that I think most people understand innately. But to require signing off on a document of this complexity, before you can even go to a meeting, is a little bit heavy.
I'd take the opposite position. Not that I don't agree that this is pretty stringent, but stringent in a healthy way. Number one, it's pretty much standard employee practice now to have employees be oriented and sign off on knowing what their guardrails are. Number two, if we don't get this taken care of at the very start of someone's tenure, when does it get taken care of? Oh, I'm too busy this week. Let's do it next month. Next month comes. Oh, and third, and the most important is, if somebody transgresses, we need to know that they've been duly explained. They've been informed of what the rules of the ethical rules are, what the conflict of interest rules are, what the expectations for courtesy and truthfulness, so that if, and we hope this doesn't happen, but if it does, the mayor and the council can say, you knew that this is against the guidelines. I can remember the Aaron Goodwin case, right, where receiving $1 million inheritances was against police policy, but there was no clear proof that he knew that. So that would be the others.
To that point, there's a thing of ignorance of the law is not justification for, not being liable for the law. And doesn't that apply here too? So, I would think that this has to be offered to people. And these are the guardrails. These are the requirements. And, but to kind of go through it in detail before anyone can even come to a meeting is pretty heavy-handed, I think.
You know, I would say that what's striking to me, having, sat on various committees and their practices, is that some committees have more lax rules with regard to participation. I think about the Sustainability Committee. The Sustainability Committee has a core group of individuals that are members of the committee that vote. But they also have individuals that come to the meetings that aren't members who sit at the table and share in discussion that don't vote. Nothing here prohibits people from actually attending a meeting and coming as a guest to the meeting, or sitting in on the meeting, or speaking during public comment, or even being called upon by the chair to participate. It just means that they're not a committee, they're not a participating committee member until they've gone through their training. So that's the way I see it, is that they're not actually a seated member of the committee until they finish the training. That doesn't mean they can't attend. In fact, a lot of people attend meetings for some time before they ask to join. At least that's the way I think of it. So I don't think of it as being that heavy-handed, because I want them to have the training, because I've been in the position, like you, Councilor Lombardi, of starting a few committees in the last few years, and my experience with those new committees is that we spent the first few meetings just going over what the rules were, because no one knew what the rules were. And a lot of people were really confused about right-to-know laws and email and just Robert's rules and what they could or couldn't do as a committee member. And so those questions kept coming up because they didn't have kind of this training in advance. And we ended up wasting a few months of time in both of our committees, just trying to figure out this stuff. So
let me offer this. I think we had talked about making sure that once everything is final, that all of this would be available, probably on the clerk's page where it talks about serving as a board or a committee member. And so members would be able to, or people who are looking to be members of various boards would have the opportunity to review all of these in advance, so that when their final appointment comes and we enter their name into the Power DMS system so that it pushes out these policies, theoretically, if they've done their homework, they've already read them. And so really it's more of an exercise of confirmation, because I would like to think when people are signing up, we'll change our webpage so that it says, hey, if you're applying, understand that these policies, link here, see here, are applicable to you, and you should review them. And if you have any questions, we'll figure out what the process is to help people understand that. But that way, there's no surprise after you're appointed, that it will be our job from a management perspective to make sure that our webpage has this information, is very transparent, and encourages applicants to look at it in advance so that when their appointment comes. I don't know if that's helpful at all, but I'm cognizant that more visibility to this might be part of the solution. I will say this, we can run reports on Power DMS, so we'll know who is signed and who hasn't. So if you wanted to do something like a 30-day window after appointment, that's, again, whatever you as a committee decide you want to do. But we do have some pieces in our wheelhouse that might help with the concerns.
Do you think this deters people?
I think it could.
I think,
I think we have committees that have some very professional people on them. And maybe I don't know, maybe they would think this is correct to do this, but also, come on, I mean, I know how to behave. I don't know. I mean, I guess we'll find out, you know.
Yeah, the biggest concern I've heard from some of the more experienced professional individuals who've served in other places is, where is the training? That's the concern I've gotten, is that I'm sitting here and half the people I'm sitting with don't know that you're not supposed to do X, Y, or Z. And that's what I was hoping that this would resolve, is for those challenges that we have in committees where we have people who haven't served in other roles and don't have the level of experience Councilor Lombardi has serving. And I know in the past, when I've served on any board, there was always a, conflict of interest policy you have to sign, and a general guidelines for the board, and you read the bylaws, and you have to do all of those things just to sit. A confidentiality agreement, those kinds of things. That's what you do with, most board service. So to me, it doesn't seem like a lot. But it may visually look like a lot, I think. But I think once it's separated out, it won't feel quite as much. Like when it's just the handbook and with a clicked link through versus it being stacked the way it is right now in your packet, I think it makes it look like a lot more than it is.
Oh, that could be. Yeah, I see that.
Yeah.
I just equate it to, you download an app for your phone, and you get the privacy policy that's, 30 pages long, and, in order to run the app, you have to agree to it, and it's like,
I will say that was part of our reason for trying to tighten it up, why Jane was trying to wordsmith a little to get it a little punchier, pithier, so that the messages that are important would not get lost.
I really appreciate the work that you've done on it, too. I mean, it's...
And then we're willing to do more or none, and whatever the will of the committee is, we'll be happy to do whatever is necessary, but thank you.
I want to make sure we're all comfortable with this moving forward, because then the council has to be comfortable with it too. So, because it'll have to be approved by the council ultimately. So I want to make sure that this is something that we think everyone will be comfortable enough with moving forward. Why don't we go through the rest of it, and then we'll look at, how much, how does this feel once we get through?
And it may help if you don't want to act at this meeting, if we brought back a clean version so you can really see how long or short it is. Sometimes just the layout can help.
And the color red,
Yeah.
Yeah.
is off-putting, It's yelling at me already? It can't be,
Good like that, yes.
Right. So that whole, requirement and timing piece we can revisit after we've kind of walked through all the other changes. And, as we sort of generally spoke about before, we just, put some references to our ordinances, for, that already exist. We tweaked the meeting again, took out a sentence that is that conflicts a little bit with, our ordinance, which is pretty strict. So we know that ordinance might need some work too, but we are trying to make sure everything speaks the same language. And the role of the city council liaison, again, nuanced it, took out an extraneous paragraph, because I really don't believe that a city council liaison is just observatory in the nature, so that didn't seem right, so we struck it.
And I think you're right. That's my experience. 'Cause
Yeah.
I'm a liaison on one committee.
Yeah.
And only a liaison, not a voting member.
Right.
And I started out just as more observatory, but
Right.
now I'm finding I get lots and lots of questions and yeah.
It certainly evolves, doesn't it?
The Neighborhoods Committee,
Right.
they're going to take advantage of your seat at the table. And
That's right.
and that's okay.
And then for open meetings, again, we took out that example of, you know, what a closed meeting would be. I don't think it's 100%. And again, all that's going to come in a training, right, in the training module. So a lot of those example types of things aren't really necessary in the handbook. And then we're now moving forward to the, it just says appointed members compliance with city policies. So we'll have to do a search for appointed, the word appointed members, and a search for the elected and appointed and make it more inclusive.
We could just say compliance with city policies.
Yeah.
Just
I
leave
would do that.
Sounds good to me. And the other is the title of the standards of conduct and code of ethics for elected and appointed officials and volunteer members of boards, committees, and commissions. I mean, could we just call it volunteer standard of conduct and code of ethics? That seems like a mouthful.
Or just standards of conduct and code of ethics,
Yeah.
period.
So here, I want to make sure that we don't get,
Confused with the staff
Yeah.
one, right, and that's kind of what
yeah.
so we could just say volunteer?
Well, and
or
we,
for
instead of
volunteers?
calling it code of ethics, we should call it ethics policy.
Yeah, that works.
Because we don't want to get it
Yep.
confused with the code of ethics that's in
Right,
the
which
ordinance.
is a different animal. Yep.
So, conduct and
Standard-
ethics policy?
Yeah, standard of conduct and ethics policy,
And ethics policy
and then just leave the rest.
out.
Yeah.
Great.
That makes sense to everyone?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Hit it on page 8.
So instead of, everywhere it says code of ethics, I think there are a few spots.
Yep, we'll
Yep,
do
we
a
can
search
search
for
for
code
it.
of ethics.
Just say ethics policy.
That's nice. That makes sense.
See,
That's
it's going to
great.
get shorter.
I know, like, less.
Pithy.
And here we're doing boards, commissions, and committees, so we can do
Get it.
that too. We can
Yep.
take those out and just do
Yep.
boards.
Yep.
Standard of conduct and ethics policy. And we'll do that. Not, the language itself did not change. This red was the new part from the prior month. And the other change was what's on 9 under the social media. We did some clarification for some boards with quasi judicial roles. We
Yes,
just
that was good.
added that, and
The risk of being a tainted quasi judicial person.
yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was actually really helpful.
so I'll have to give City Attorney Susan Morrill, she picked up on that edit. I'm not going to take credit for it. And then, so that was the volunteer handbook. And then we updated, the next doc was the parliamentary motions and guide. And that's a 2-page document. The only thing.
Can I pick you up quickly?
Oh,
The
sorry.
very last line on page 9.
Absolutely.
Where we say a board member's failure to adhere to these policies, rules, and procedures can negatively influence the member's reappointment or change in role from alternate to permanent member, or may be grounds for removal,
Just period?
period.
Yeah.
And take
I
out
got
the
that.
through legal processes, because I think people are
Yeah.
confused about what legal processes are.
Yep.
So,
Right,
Yep.
does that mean you have to go to Superior Court? Does that mean?
Yep.
Yes.
City Council?
Yeah, that's too legally. So we were able to get the more recent parliamentary motion guide, which is there. The only thing that Susan and I discussed was number 37, which was the reconsideration motion, which isn't as robust as I think it should be, because my recollection is that someone who was in the majority of a motion may
Yep.
bring it forward for reconsideration, has to be the same meeting, or a date certain to be
Yep.
picked up. And there's been, and that I think can come through training, but that is something we didn't change the chart because we inherited this chart, but I think that could be helpful.
It would be very helpful to rotate this on the PDF too.
yeah, I don't know if I can. Wait.
Oh, yeah, that's true, yes. We can do that.
Let me just ask this, because I saw this in here a while ago that there was going to be a reference. I have never seen, I've been sitting through a lot of committee meetings over 20 years, oh, I think I'm getting 21. Hold on, someone.
You are.
Oh, there it is.
And, you know, outside of the city council, we don't use any of these.
Yeah, that's true.
Except, you know, motion to approve X,
Yeah.
or motion to deny X, and motion to adjourn, which everyone is usually happy with by the end
Or
of the meeting.
amendments.
So
Yeah.
I just didn't know, now I know sometimes at the planning board or one of those other boards where they're actually hearing applications, they may need, and they have some of their own rules, like the city council has their own. That
Right.
motion for reconsideration is a city council rule. It is
Yeah.
not a rule applicable per se to the boards, committees, and commissions. So I didn't, what we could do, since we're going to take final edits, if you want, we could make a really shorthand, like 4 basic motions for most of the committees, and then with and subject to whatever additional rules, you know. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there to the point of having it not be
So scary.
so scary that people feel like, oh, I've got to learn all these rules if I want to participate. Because I literally have, outside of the city council, and maybe a few weird things happening in the land use boards, because they have different standards, and they have sometimes their own rules and what you need, and their statutory rules, and what carries a motion, or what happens when there's a tie. So anyways, it's a thought. If you're trying to skinny things up, we could do like 4 basic ones to say, you know, signal the chair, make your motion. You
Yeah.
know, this is the the Roberts Rules is the backdrop, but if you wanted to go skinnier, we might be able to do something. It's totally
But this could be a
up to you.
link. This could be a link as opposed to like or more like resource.
Right.
You know,
Oh,
like
yeah.
Yeah.
like a
Yes.
like a
Yeah.
resource.
Resource is
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
I like
Um,
that, yeah.
You know, other motions.
Other motions, right, with a link.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I've
You
never,
know, something, I mean,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
yeah.
That makes sense to simplify it.
People are generally not going to move to postpone something indefinitely.
Right.
Or delay something on the table. or
Right.
to- You know, all of
Right.
those.
Right.
I
And they
mean-
mean different things depending upon where you
Right.
are. In
Yeah.
the legislature, they mean something very different than
Yes,
they do.
exactly.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So,
So this comes from the clerk's office, you know, so I don't know if they post it as a resource on their page, but we certainly could, you know, either internally in this document or externally for
Yeah, we could find a way
pages.
to
Yeah.
make a link somewhere.
under
Yeah.
the little section, wow, I don't remember where the Roberts Rules comment was. There was it's back here a ways. I think there was, I'm going back, I'm looking.
We can find it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's
Um,
early on in the book.
That's what I was
Yep.
thinking. That's what I was looking for.
It is early on in the book.
Oh, here we go. Generally, Robert's Rules of Order are followed for board.
where are you?
It's on page 3.
Yep, right here.
I'm in the middle.
Above relationship with city staff.
Yeah, generally, procedure and chairpersons have some discretion. Here, you could put a link
Yeah.
that says, you know, if you're not familiar with Robert's Rules, here's a helpful link, but generally, committees operate under 4 basic motions, and you
Yeah.
could just list
List them right there.
list
Yeah,
them
that
there.
would be great, I
And then-
think.
And that would,
Yeah.
so people could look at them if they wanted to,
But they don't have to link to somewhere else.
yeah.
Unless they really want to.
That's a good idea.
Does that
Yep.
work for everyone?
Yeah,
Sounds
That's
good.
great, yes.
Yep.
that shortens up half a page.
Yep.
There you go, 2 pages gone.
We can do.
Yeah. And again, someone looking at it is like, how am I supposed to remember all this? You know, if they're not familiar, they won't
Right.
have to. They'll just have to look at the simpler motions. We did put the org chart in. This is the one from our budget book. I think that's probably helpful because, you know, people who work here may not be as familiar with the org chart and also the various
I
committees.
mean, that's more like an appendix, right?
Yeah, just a resource for them to
resource,
have,
you know.
which is good.
I think it's really, really helpful,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah.
Because people are always asking, how does this work? You know?
Yep.
Right. what are all the different departments, depending on what the question is and
Yeah.
who weighs in on what. All right, so moving along, I guess, is this city council policy. Again, we would change the name, right?
Yeah, standards of conduct and ethics policy,
Period, yeah.
period.
Period.
Knock the rest off.
And just to clarify, the yellow is really more like a red line, like we took the staff one, which is in the white, and then modified it for purposes of volunteers, and that's what the yellow is instead of a red. Very colorful.
This is what drives the need for a handbook. This is
Yeah,
a
it's the heart of
policy
it.
we have to adopt.
Yes. And it's not, I think you might have seen one prior iteration of this. This is just just a few more things were added from before, a little wordsmithing. I don't think major paragraphs were added. I just think we just tweaked a few of the paragraphs that were already existing. J probably should be highlighted too, because that was a specific reference to our ordinance.
Yes. So we already have, I want to note, we already have a policy, a conflict of interest policy that we
Right.
adopted, that
City
governance
council, yeah.
put forward
Yes.
to adopt, that covers things not in the code of ethics,
Yep.
but really applies to the city council. Maybe we should say something instead of just saying standard of conduct and ethics policy. So I don't know how we want to phrase that, because I want it to be clear that this is not just another.
Another layer.
Right, another layer that we're adding, that this volunteer, maybe say volunteer training, standards of conduct and code of ethics policy.
Yeah, I think,
Start it with volunteer training so that it's clear that it's related to volunteer training.
and I think that J is when we reference those more robust ordinances that you've already changed, and like the reporting and,
And there'll be
Exactly.
links to them.
we could link it in the policy, but we just referenced the ordinance in the very
Yeah.
last paragraph.
But it's linked in the handbook, right? It's linked in the
Yes.
handbook?
Yep.
So there is a link? Okay. Just making sure.
Yeah, the ordinances.
So we took out some of the language about recusal. It was more in the nature of, you can't speak to these. Do we have that in the conflict of interest and a clear link? I just don't want to lose that. Jane, you said this is covered later. Let's just
So-
make sure that that's.
Yes, on page 8,
I'll go back to 8 here.
in the volunteer handbook, there's a link to the City of Portsmouth ordinances that
Yep, there it
links
is.
to all,
Here we go.
Chapter 1,
Yep.
and conflicts of interest and financial disclosure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it just is all the ordinances, Doesn't link to the,
Yeah, I,
Specific.
not to that particular page, but it does reference, yeah. I
Yeah.
did not, maybe
just
there's a way to
tried
do
it.
that. I didn't know how to do it, but
Yeah.
I can check.
It's hard at the moment. Well, at the moment on the clerk's page, they're all lumped together.
Yeah.
Right.
You can only pull up the
Oh, I mean, that's where that
administrative.
link
Chapter
goes.
one,
It says
yeah.
City ordinances.
Yeah, so you can't link individually.
You could.
You could, yeah,
I think you can link to chapter.
You can link to the chapter.
You can link to the chapter.
okay.
And I think that's what,
That's what,
Did I-
as long as the number's listed,
yeah.
so it's clear what they're looking for in the chapter.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I
Um,
looked it up myself.
Yeah.
You have to have a pad of pencil and paper and write down the section and the numbers, and then you can go look it up. But
We're still working on that.
So I'll make
hard
sure
'cause-
that link is to the chapter 1.
Yeah, if we start creating separate links and putting it here, then every time it's updated, we have to remember
yeah,
all the places it is.
Right.
I don't want the clerk to have more work figuring that out. That's what I'm concerned about. I don't want to make more work. Yeah. It's going to be enough to track that everyone's, and that's one of the logistical questions is, does the clerk track that or does the chair track that? You know, who, you know, if their committee member has finished their training or,
We will track that internally. It may not be, Human Resources actually manages the Power DMS sort of policy push-out. So they will run reports for us, and we'll talk with the clerk's office, and we'll figure out what makes the most logical sense
okay.
to track that, and then give a report back to the chair.
To the
of each
chair,
committee
or-
To say, yep, all your new members have had their training. We'll have to, that's on us.
Figure out how that's
Yep.
going to work, yeah. I didn't, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I just put a comment in that is the link to chapter 1.
Right, I'll make that change. That's to the general clerks, but I can change the link to chapter 1.
Yeah.
Yep.
One of the things that isn't said in here, in the policy, is we need to make sure that it says somewhere in the policy, the same thing that you say in the handbook about required training, required to participate in training, so that it's clear the city council has adopted a policy that says you have to participate in training, or you,
We can cut and paste the, was it on page 3 again, or?
I believe so.
It's on page 5.
Okay.
New board members will be required to participate in member orientation and training, and then failure to complete this orientation. And we can also talk about signing off on the policy. So training includes review the handbook and the policies and.
In the policy.
Yep.
But I think it has to be
But you
clear.
need to be in here, too.
Yes.
Yeah, it
Yes,
needs
I
to be
agree.
clear in the
Yep.
policy that we're
Yep.
requiring people to go through training.
Yep.
Yeah, and then so we'll put a new paragraph at the bottom.
Okay. And then this serves as the guiding document, the policy, for the handbook, and any revisions that happen to the handbook over time, and any changes just have to conform to what this policy says. Does that make sense for everyone? Okay. And you're just going to put that paragraph at the very end?
The
Okay.
very last
Yeah.
one, very last one.
Okay. Does that work for everyone? Having it?
yes, yeah, we're requiring the acknowledgement.
Are there any questions about the policy here? Is everyone comfortable with it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just remembering over the years in management, you know, in the 80s and 90s, it was, don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, don't, you know, here's what cause is, and don't do those things. But if you want to be proactive about harassment, if you want to be proactive about ethics, you have to define it. And it's now standard practice to have people sign that they've read it. So it is a lot, but it's not anything anyone wouldn't experience in the private sector. And it's also a way of saying these are our high standards. We expect you to meet them.
Yeah, I'm always concerned, like you, Counselor Tabor, that nowadays we do things this way because we're not always sure that everyone has had this kind of experience. There are a lot of people who work as independent contractors, have not been employed, have not run into policies like this, have not served on a board anywhere else. We just want to make sure that they're very familiar with what those kind of expectations are.
Yep.
in an
There's also
environment.
people who think it's okay
Yes.
to lie, to harass, to,
Yes, unfortunately, our society has moved in some ways against prior norms of behavior. So sometimes you have to lay them out, make them very clear.
Yeah, but a committee or a board can't function if somebody is always bringing in their own set of facts that aren't true.
right.
So I think you do have to say it, regardless of the outside climate. If we want our boards to be effective and come back to the city council with meaningful stuff, they have to meaningfully deliberate.
Very well said. Okay, are there any other concerns or questions about this? And I want to specifically check in with Counselor Lombardi. How do you feel now about the handbook? We've taken out a few things and,
Yeah, I mean, I get it, and I get it specifically in our current environment. It's pretty necessary. Makes me sad that, we have to tell people that they have to behave.
as far as from the staff side of things, are we comfortable with this moving forward without it coming back here? I guess that's my big question. Do we want to have one more cleanup and look at it one more time, or are we comfortable with it?
I guess I'd like to see it in its final form.
Okay. Okay,
That can't hurt.
okay. It's completely reasonable. All right. So if there are no other questions or concerns here,
Yeah.
I think,
We actually have the one last policy, too.
yes. But we will have this policy and handbook completed, coming back to us at the
Yes.
next meeting
Yes.
in final form. That's the
Yep.
hope.
Yes, we'll take away all the reds, the yellows, you have a
Just
nice,
be nice,
clean
clean.
version, but we'll find a way to flag the pieces that have been changed, but we'll find a method that works, so it's cleaner.
Sounds great. And then we're going to move on to the non-discrimination anti-harassment policy.
We didn't make any edits to that. That's just the staff policy. So the training just says substitute, volunteer for employee, and instead of management or chair. And that's all we did there, but we could do more if you want to have it more adapted to volunteers.
How do we feel?
So my copy still has a piece on employee and supervisor responsibilities.
Right.
So the decision was to leave that.
We just cut and paste the staff policy, but the actual volunteer training manual in the narrative says
To the extent
to
applicable.
the extent. Yep,
Okay, cool, thanks.
yep.
So, yeah, I had a question of, in the employee world, if there's, somebody does something wrong or is accused of doing something wrong, there's an investigation, and that falls to the supervisor or the city manager. So who would investigate in the case of boards and commissions? Would that be the mayor? Would that be the city attorney?
I think if we're talking, statutory,
Right.
requirements, so it would go to human resources and legal, and there would be a discussion about how it was going to be handled
Yeah.
from an investigation point of view. And depending on the nature of the charge, depending on a whole bunch of factors, will determine whether we do it in-house or with outside counsel.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty clear path.
Yeah. That seems reasonable. Hopefully, this is not something we encounter.
Hopefully not.
I think giving the warning, here's the policy.
Right.
Is enough for people to go.
Oh, yeah, no, I think it's always surprising how people are not aware of how their actions can be harassing, or how a climate can become harassing. And that just takes training, and that just takes education.
So everyone's comfortable with just attaching that one. And then we have acceptable use policy.
And that's when if you have city property, you have to use the phone which is really not that applicable to most
Yeah.
of the volunteers, but to some.
It's helpful because we have a lot of committees that might end up with iPads over time that don't have them now. I'm thinking about the audit committee that reviews RFPs at some point may end up with iPads for that process, right? For short term or something. So they'd need to know what the IT policy was on that. The Public Art Review Committee reviews all those proposals and did them in paper, but will they be reviewing them electronically in the future? Potentially. So, maybe good for everybody to know what that is. And people can self-select if that is applicable to them. And so here, this is the
training.
training policy.
Yeah, this is the one you started with.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So, so this is where we started, and we've ended up with the other. So this one is not, this is kind of artifact? Is that what we would say? So everybody
Well,
knows?
it talks about what the training should actually be. I don't know, the handbook is the handbook, and then the other is an ethics and standard of conduct policy, and this would just be if the council wanted to adopt what training should look like, have some input on the structure of that, and this is that structure.
Do we want to, this is something we've discussed a few times. Do we want to take this section, the orientation and training section, and just lump it into the other
Policy.
the other policy? So we
Yes.
have one policy?
Yes.
Because you could take, the objectives and purpose is pretty much the same, and scope is
Sure.
going to be applicable. But the
Section 3.
orientation and training section, you could take and just lump it back here. I'm going back, everyone.
Sure.
Give me a second. Here, you know how you said at the end, policies you have to follow, and then that
A
paragraph.
training could go right there.
And you can put training right at
Should
the
be
end.
K.
And just put,
Yep.
with the subsections, the list, because the list is what's in the handbook anyway.
Yep.
How does everyone feel about that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
So it's just one
One,
policy for
yeah.
the city
Right.
council to approve.
One policy for volunteers to look at,
Yep.
not too much.
Yeah, I think I can help you, Jane, because
Oh,
I
yeah.
remember working on this one.
Yeah, no, I think,
We do a little
three, yeah, we can maybe
Yeah, it's
edit
section
three, because it's 3A through F. Are you anticipating that, just import that and slightly
Right.
edit?
That.
Mhm.
So that we don't have
Yeah,
a separate.
yeah, it makes
We
sense.
did the same thing with public art, trying to get rid of all the
Yep.
duplicative
Perfect.
policies and ordinances, because it can get confusing.
That'd be much better.
Okay. Everyone's comfortable with that?
yeah, so
too?
just 3 goes into the,
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah.
push it at the end of the prior policy, the very last component of that.
Okay. And so we'll see that too.
Mhm.
Okay. I think that's it on volunteer training.
Yeah.
Everyone can, very good. And I think we'll be all set for our next meeting to review that, to review everything in final form.
Might not be a bad idea for each of us to show it to a friend who's a layman, who's never, we're seeing this because
You've lived with
we've
it for a
had
while.
4, 6 years. Vince has had 20. But somebody coming at it cold. who's a
Yeah,
friend,
that's
say,
true.
What would you think if you had?
I have a few committee members that haven't been through training here that I would like to show it to. That had lots of questions at the beginning of their committee service. Maybe to say, hey, what do you think of this? Is this what you were looking for? You know, does this encompass it? Does this provide the answers you need?
Right.
Yeah. Or does it not? Or is it too much? Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Okay.
You feel like you're defeated before you start reading this. Or do you think it's sound? I mean, I think it's sound, but.
I think it's great, Counselor Tabor. I think now we all have homework.
Do you want me to try to get this draft to you folks in advance of the next governance so that you can do your homework? And
That's always appreciated.
Yes.
So the next governance meeting is November 25th at 11.
That's where we're scheduled, but I think we're going to try not to have that one.
Okay.
We were going to try to go for December. Is that
Okay.
going to hurt any
I
scheduling?
like that.
I'm on a plane November 25th. so-
okay, so
Okay.
that one's canceled.
Yeah,
Okay.
November 25th, we were going to try to hold off because it's Thanksgiving week.
Okay.
Then I can definitely get you the draft before the next meeting.
Yeah,
So the next
Yeah.
meeting is,
I believe it's, I want to say December,
9th.
I can't, yeah, December 9th. So we've got a little time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
And so if we get this sooner, then we can,
yeah.
So if we discuss it the 9th, we could have it in the packet for the 16th.
Yes,
Yeah.
because you meet on Mondays. That lets us get it on Tuesday,
perfect.
Is that,
right? The 9th. Yeah.
that might be the only business we do at that meeting besides the Christmas
Yes.
high school band.
And I'll start running this by the mayor to see if we should come in with a request for first reading or come in for first read, or well, it's not even first reading, it's a policy.
Right.
If he wants us to come in for a request to discuss it in January, or if he wants us to come in with a discussion in December too. So,
Might have a whole fresh bunch of appointments in January.
yes, exactly. We would benefit by adopting it in December rather than in January, so we have a fresh start in January. But I'll have that conversation and see
Right.
what he thinks on timing, so everyone's ready, and I'll report back
Yeah.
in December
Right.
on where we are. The next thing is administrative ordinance review, divisions into chapters 1 and 2.
Yep. And inching ever so closer to getting you a draft, which includes changes to a whole bunch of sections in 1 and 2, so kind of picking them off. So you should have that by the time of December. People keep giving me suggestions, and I keep putting them in. And then the other piece that has come up is, we've heard from some of the restaurants and other local businesses that we have some inconsistencies in some of the way our licenses and our permitting fees and our encumbrance permits work. And so there's a request that maybe we could revisit those and clarify those. So we'd like to, maybe work with Councilor Cook and bring this to the city council to get a referral back here to governance, so that we could begin to work on that as we reach the new year and try and get, these little pieces cleaned up. And maybe we chunk it out in small bits, knowing that we have some things that are definitely confusing to folks, and feel a bit unfair, I think, in terms of how some of the structure's working. So that's kind of on us to figure out other nice pieces that we should kind of chunk out one at a time. And it kind of interplays also with fees. And so you'll be looking at fees, obviously, at the beginning of the year as part of the budget process. So I think it would be good timing in January to kind of talk about a couple of these things and see if we can, tidy up some pieces.
Yeah, I think when we went through that whole policy, it was, or I guess ordinance, it was, I think we expected it to be a trial, if you will, and it would be coming back with some tweaks.
Yeah.
Oh, the outdoor dining?
Yeah.
Yes, and I think you're getting a report back at the next meeting, so it's perfectly timed.
Right.
Good.
Getting those, the planning is going to give the report back. And, considering whatever that is, with these issues that have come to our legal team's, attention through either the public or, planning staff or DPW staff about trouble people are having. I think our preliminary, I think you have the email, is, various sections of Chapter 8, Chapter 9, Chapter 11, a city council policy, outdoor dining, Chapter 6, and they all really relate to encumbering temporarily city property. So it would
Right.
be a very appreciated effort, I think, if we could collaborate, and think about how we want to shape this in a revised ordinance, and it would be helpful to.
I guess I wonder, since the EDC did a deep dive on that ordinance, whether they should also be involved on some level.
For the specific revisions to the outdoor dining?
Yeah.
Or all of this whole discussion?
Well, I mean,
Open question.
yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to see this as not a policy change, but as fixing inconsistencies in ordinances, not trying to change the policies.
I just don't want to ignore the EDC, because they did spend a lot of time on that.
Perhaps a report back could go to the EDC as well. I mean, probably it's Peter Stith who's presenting the report back on outdoor dining.
I think it should.
I think it should. I can make sure that happens.
Okay.
Yep. And I think as you have a discussion here, it'll become obvious, I think, whether there's a piece or pieces that you might want to either suggest a referral over.
Right. Yep.
I think as we tee it up better ourselves, We just know that, particularly because you've got budget, coming early in the year with fees, that if there are pieces that we need to fix within our ordinance that will help you, then us collectively make sure we have everything right. But I don't think it is less about changing fees so much as fixing places where there are inconsistencies or opportunities where we might see, based on what the city council might want to encourage downtown. It'll hopefully be clearer where those opportunities are. I think that's part of the look at licenses and encumbrances in part.
I just think it's in recognition of the effort that they put into it.
Yeah,
They definitely should have their report back from
Yeah.
yes.
planning, yeah.
Yep.
And then if they decide they want to get involved. in
Well,
some way or another.
they're not necessarily looking, but they also are. I mean, they want to
Right.
serve the council.
Yeah. Well, and it's something, we can start having that discussion here about fixing some of this, and maybe it's we invite, as we've done in the past, invite the chair in to discuss that, or, a few members to come in and discuss that with us as well.
Just don't have him present.
We won't ask that. Is there anything else today? No? From what I can tell, we don't have public comment. I don't have anyone on Zoom. Our next meeting is December the 9th.
Okay, so I'll take off the 25th.
Take the 25th out of your schedule. And the only thing left is a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.